Boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Robert Sports Show. I'm your host, Robert. Alright, NCAA week number 4. Ooh, what a 3 weeks it's been so far. Last week, win-loss 44-11, against the spread 25-30, over-under 33-22. Year-to-date, win-loss 259-153. Against the spread, 65-69. Huh? That ain't right. The hell did I do? I don't know what the hell I wrote down. But, something ain't right on those numbers. That is too weird. Okay. Yeah, because I haven't done that many games this year. That's retarded. I know overall, the overall numbers are 259 and 153 for 62.8%. That's win-loss against the spread and over-under combined. I'm not sure what I wrote down there, so I don't have the year-to-date win-loss totals, but against the spread, year-to-date, I'm 65-69. And the over-under year-to-date, I am 73-61. I'll have the updated win-loss next week. I do apologize. All right. 58 games here in week 4. Have them all right here. So I'm doing the picks against the spread over-under on all 58 games of week 4. First game, we have a battle of the American Conference. We have the Houston Cougars 1-2 versus the Tulane Green Wave 2-1. Houston has won 8 of 10 versus Tulane. Tulane is favored by 4.5 at home. I'm giving the 4.5 to Houston. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 56. Next up, we have Battle of Conference USA. We have the Florida International Panthers 1-2 versus Louisiana Tech Bulldogs 2-1. Tech is favored by 10 at home. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 51.5. Next up, we have the 10th ranked Utah Utes. The big Pac-12 matchup versus the USC Trojans. The Utes are 3-1. The Trojans are 2-1. The Utes are 3-0. The Trojans are 2-1. Sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. USC is 1-5 of 9 versus the Utah. Utah is favored by 4 on the road. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 53.5. Next up, we have a Mountain West matchup. We have the 2-0 Air Force Falcons versus the 3-0 20th ranked Boise State Broncos. Boise State is favored by 8 at home. I have them winning. I have Air Force covering the 8 and under on the 55. Next up, we have a big SEC matchup. We have the 4th ranked LSU Tigers at 3-0 versus the 0-2 Vanderbilt Commodores. LSU has won 6 straight versus Vandy. LSU has a tall task among them if their goal is to get the SEC title game and make the playoffs. Because they have to face a 3-0 Auburn. They have to face a 3-0 Alabama. They have to face a 2-1 Ole Miss and a 2-1 Texas A&M. They have to beat all them teams to get near the playoffs. Can they do it? I don't know. I know right now they're going to beat Vandy handily. They're favored by 23.5, and I got them covering. This is a good warm-up match. They need to make sure they are clicking because they face, I think, Alabama next week or the week after. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough season for LSU. I hope they get there. I want them to make the playoffs. I'm tired of seeing Alabama there, to be honest with you. I mean, they are the greatest team on earth, but, hey, we want to see some new blood there. LSU, who can win in Death Valley at night on a Saturday night? No one, almost. But I have LSU winning on the road. They're going to cover the 23.5 and under on the 62. Next up, we have the Louisiana Monroe Warhawks out of the Sun Belt, 1-1 versus the Big 12's Iowa State Cyclones, who are also 1-1. Iowa State favored by 18.5 at home. I got Iowa State winning. I got the Warhawks covering that 18.5, and I'm taking 55. I'm taking under on the 55.5. Next up, we have the Conference USA, the 2-1 Southern Miss Golden Eagles versus the second-ranked Alabama Crimson Tide, who are 3-0, who have won 9 of 10 versus Louisiana, or Southern Miss, excuse me. Favored by 39 with an over-under of 60.5. Win, cover, over. It seems like Alabama's non-conference schedule gets weaker and weaker each year. It's like they don't have... It just seems like especially their schedule this year, it's like they don't play anyone until the championship game. But that's how it is when you're that good, when you're that dominant. I mean, Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, two of the greatest football minds there are. People are going to hate when you win a lot. Next up, we have out of the American Conference, the Connecticut Huskies 1-1 versus the 2-1 Big Ten team of Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana is favored by 27 at home. I got Indiana winning, but UConn is actually 2-0 versus the Hoosiers all time. UConn has never lost to Indiana. It's like, what the hell? Indiana's favored by 27. I'm not saying UConn's going to win, but I got Indiana winning. I got UConn covering 27. I think it could be an interesting game, and under on the 58. Next up, I have out of the SEC, I have the Tennessee Volunteers at 1-2 versus the 9th-ranked 3-0 Florida Gators. Gators are favored by 2 touchdowns at home. The Gators are very interesting as well. They're currently 3-0 in the SEC, just like Georgia, LSU, and Auburn. Obviously, as we all know, there can only be 2 teams at the end of the day going to the SEC title game. Can Florida be one of those 2 teams? Early on, they look like they can. But again, they got 3 big teams they got to fight for to get there. Who gets the right to play Alabama? That's pretty much what they're playing for. But I have them winning here, covering the 14 and over on the 48.5. Next up, we have out of the MAC, the Western Michigan Broncos 2-1 out of the ACC. The Syracuse Orange 1-2. Syracuse is favored by 8 at home. I have them winning, covering, and over on the 65.5. Next up, we have an FBS team, the Morgan State Bears 0-2 versus the Army Black Knights, who are 2-1. Army's favored by 49.5. I have the Black Knights winning, Morgan State covering, and under on the 59.5. Next up, we have out of the Pac-12, the 3-0 California Golden Bears versus the 2-1 Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss favored by 2 at home. I'm going on a limb here, folks. Taking California, I'm giving them +2. They're going to cover that and under on the 44.5. Next up, we have the Michigan State Spartans 2-1 versus the Northwestern Wildcats 1-1. Both out of the Big Ten. Michigan State with 1 loss. In order for them maybe to sniff the Big Ten title game, they're going to have to win out. They got to face a 3-0 Ohio State, a 3-0 Penn State, and a 2-0 Michigan. So I don't think these Spartans are going to be able to win out and get into that Big Ten title game. The way the playoffs have been going, you almost have to have 1 win or 1 loss to make it. They get a second loss, their hopes of playoffs, Big Ten championship may be out. It all depends if the rest of the Big Ten beats up on each other. Michigan State is favored by 10. I have them winning. I have Northwestern covering the 10 and over on the 39.5. Next up, we have the Boston College Eagles out of the ACC 2-1 versus the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who are 1-1 out of the Big Ten. Boston College is favored by a touchdown. I have them winning, covering, and under on the 57.5. Note, Boston College has never lost to Rutgers. Next up, we have the Elan Phoenix out of the FCS 2-1 versus the Wake Forest Demon Deacons 3-0 out of the ACC. Wake Forest is favored 27.5. I got them winning, covering, taking under on the 57.5. Next up, probably one of the bigger games of the weekend out of the Big Ten. East versus West. The 11th ranked Michigan Wolverines 2-0 versus the 13th ranked Wisconsin Badgers, also 2-0. In those two wins, Wisconsin has scored 110 points. They have given up a goose egg. 0. Back-to-back shutouts. But, now they're facing the Wolverines of Michigan. Can these two teams, can this be a preview of the Big Ten title game? I don't know. The Wolverines got to face 3-0 Ohio. Matter of fact, both teams have to face a 3-0 Ohio State, a 3-0 Iowa, a 2-1 Michigan State. Wolverines also have to face a 2-0 Notre Dame and a 3-0 Penn State. But they have 3 mutual Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan State. Yeah. No, I don't think this is going to be a title game preview. I don't think both of them can get through that monster schedule they have. Is it possible that each of these teams could have one loss? Face off in a big title game, the winner goes on to the playoffs? You damn sure that could possibly happen. Right now, Wisconsin is favored by 3.5. I got Michigan winning, covering the 3.5. No, actually, I'm going to freeze that. Michigan winning. I'm giving them the 3.5, but I have Wisconsin covering it, so I think it's going to be a field goal game. Taking under on the 43.5. So Michigan wins. Wisconsin will cover the 3.5, and then under on the 43.5. Next up, we have the Coastal Carolina, how the fuck you pronounce their name, Chanticleers, something like that. Out of the Sun Belt 2-1 versus the UMass Minutemen 0-3. Coastal Carolina is favored by 17. I've been winning. I have UMass covering and under on the 62.5. Next up, we have the Louisiana Raging Cajuns 2-1 versus the Ohio Bobcats 1-2. Bobcats favored by 3. I get them winning, covering, and under on the 66. Next up, we have the Troy Trojans, who are 1-1 versus the Akron Zips, who are 0-3. Troy's favored by 17. I get them winning, covering, and over on the 56. Next up, we got Central Connecticut Blue Devils out of the FCS, 3-0, versus the Eastern Michigan Eagles, are 2-1 out of the MAC. Eastern Michigan favored by 32.5 at home. I do have Central Connecticut covering that 32.5. I'm taking under on the 63. Another huge game for the weekend with the 8th ranked Auburn Tigers out of the SEC 3-0 versus SEC opponent, the 17th ranked 2-1 Texas A&M Aggies. These two SEC powerhouses have a daunting task ahead of them if they want to make the playoffs. They have, the Tigers have LSU, who are 3-0. They have Georgia, who's 3-0. Florida, 3-0. And then the Iron Bowl versus Alabama, also 3-0. The Aggies have Alabama, Georgia, LSU. So, that daunting SEC schedule where is Alabama going to roll tide? Is Georgia just going to bulldog their way through everything? Or can the Tiger reach up there and take the brass ring? In this game here, Texas is favored by 4. I'm giving the 4 to Auburn. I like what Auburn's doing this year. I got them winning, covering the 4 and over on the 47.5. And we'll see if the Tiger can take a shot at the tide. We'll see if the Tigers can bite that Bulldogs. Next up, we have the SMU Mustangs at 3-0 versus the 25th ranked TCU Horned Frogs out of the Big 12, who are 2-0. TCU is 9-1 all-time versus SMU. I got them winning, covering the 9.5 and over on the 55.5. Next up, we have the 15th ranked Central Florida Knights, 3-0 versus the 1-2 Pittsburgh Panthers. The Knights are favored by 12. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 58. Next up, the South Alabama Jags, 1-2 versus the University of Alabama Blazers, University of Alabama, Birmingham Blazers, who are 2-0. Say that 10 times fast. UAB, favored by 10. Get them winning, covering, and under on the 50. Next up, we have the Wyoming Cowboys out of the Mountain West here at 3-0 versus the Tulsa Golden Hurricanes, who are 1-2. Tulsa is favored by 3.5 at home. You know what? I'm giving the 3.5 to Wyoming. I got Wyoming winning, covering the 3.5 and under on the 44.5. Next up, we have out of the Pac-12 the 2-1, 22nd ranked Washington Huskies, who are going into BYU, who are 2-1. Huskies are favored by 5.5 at home, 5.5 on the road. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 51.5. Next up, we have the Appalachian State Mountaineers, who are 2-0, versus the North Carolina Tar Heels, who are 2-1. Tar Heels favored by 4. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 58. Next up, we have out of the MAC the 1-2 Miami of Ohio Redhawks versus the 3-0 6th-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. Buckeyes are favored by 39. I have them winning, covering, and over on the 58.5. They have 3 wins versus Miami of Ohio. They won 27-10, 34-14, and 56-10. So I think they definitely got that one. All right, next up we have out of the American, we have the 2-0 Temple Owls versus the 1-2 Buffalo Bulls. Temple's favored by 2 touchdowns on the road. I got them winning, covering, over on the 53. Next up out of the MAC, we have a pair of 1-2 teams. Bowling Green Falcons versus the Kent State Golden Flashes. Kent State is favored by 10.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 59. Next up out of the ACC, the 1-2 Florida State Seminoles taking on the 2-1 Louisville Cardinals. Florida State is favored by 6.5 at home. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 61.5. Next up, we have a pair of SEC teams. We have South Carolina Gamecocks going into Middle Missouri versus the Missouri Tigers, who are 2-1. Missouri is favored by 9.5 at home. Oh, I don't know which Missouri team we're going to get. We're going to get that team that faced Wyoming, or we're going to get that team that faced SEMO. Which one are we getting? Hopefully we get the one that faced SEMO that has everything clicking on offense. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 63.5. Covering the 9.5 and under on the 63.5. Next up, we have the 2-1 Central Michigan Chippewas versus the 1-2 Miami Hurricanes. Hurricanes are favored by 30.5 at home. I got the Hurricanes winning. I got the Chippewas covering the 30.5 and under on the 51. Next up, another matchup from the SEC. The Kentucky Wildcats 2-1 versus the Mississippi State Bulldogs 2-1. The Bulldogs have steamrolled the Wildcats 8 of the last 10 times they faced up. Bulldogs favored by 6, winning, covering, and over on the 48.5. Next up, we have the New Mexico State Aggies 0-3 versus the New Mexico Lobos 1-1. New Mexico is favored by 4.5. I have New Mexico winning. The Lobos, that is. Versus the, I got them winning, covering the 4.5 and over on the 68.5. Next up, out of the Big 12, a pair of 2-1 teams with West Virginia Mountaineers versus the Kansas Jayhawks. West Virginia is 6 wins in the last 7 matchups versus the Jayhawks. Mountaineers are favored by 4.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 51. Next up, we have the William Mary Tribe out of the FCS versus East Carolina Pirates, who are 1-2. East Carolina favored by 12. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 47. The Hampton Pirates versus 2-1 versus the Liberty Flames 1-2. Liberty is favored by 24.5. I got them winning, covering. I got them winning. I got Hampton covering the 24.5 and under on the 54. Next up, we have the Wagner Seahawks versus the Florida Atlantic Owls. The Owls are 1-2. The Seahawks are 0-3. Florida Atlantic is favored by 35. I have them winning. I have Wagner covering at 35 and under on the 57.5. Next up, we have the Old Dominion Monarchs, who are 1-1, versus the 21st ranked Virginia Cavaliers, who are 3-0 out of the ACC. Cavaliers are favored by 29.5. I have them winning, covering, and over on the 47.5. Can Virginia upset Clemson in that ACC? I don't know. They have a 2-0 Notre Dame they got to face coming up. They have a Miami team, and then they have a North Carolina team. They can win out. They might be able to challenge Clemson for the ACC title this year. Next up, we have the Georgia State Panthers, 2-1, versus the Texas State Bobcats, 0-3. Battle of the Sun Belt teams. Texas State favored by 3. I'm giving the 3 to Georgia State. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 64.5. Next up, we have the Baylor Bears, who are 2-0 in the Big 12, versus the Rice Owls, who are 0-3. Baylor has beaten Rice 5 straight games with an average score of 47-17. They are favored by 26 here. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 58. Next up, we have the Nebraska Cornhuskers, 2-1, versus the Illinois Fighting Illini, 2-1. A big Big Ten matchup here. Nebraska is 5-1 in the last 6 versus Illinois. Nebraska favored by 13. Go Red. Got them winning, covering, and over on the 63.5. Next up, we have the Southern Illinois Salukis out of the Missouri Valley versus the 1-2 Arkansas State Red Wolves. Arkansas State is favored by 23. I think the Salukis will cover that 23, and I'm taking under on the 62.5. Next up, we have the 16th ranked Oregon Ducks out of the Pac-12 versus another Pac-12 team of Stanford Cardinal. Cardinal 1-2. The Ducks are 2-1. Ducks are favored by 10.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 58.5. Next up, we have the Ball State Cardinals, who are 1-2, versus the NC State Wolfpack, who are 2-1. NC State is favored by 19. I got Ball State covering that 19, but I got the Wolfpack winning and over on the 58. Next up, we have the San Jose State Spartans, who are 1-1, versus the Arkansas Razorbacks, who are 2-1. Arkansas is favored by 21. I got them winning. I have San Jose State covering and under on the 61. Next up, we have the 2-1 Charlotte 49ers versus the number 1 ranked team in the country, the ACC defending champions, the 3-0 Clemson Tigers, who are favored by 41.5. Their average score this year has been 39-10. Charlotte's covering at 41.5. That's a big fucking number. I love how these sites throw out these huge over/under numbers, trying to get people to either take the over or under. Clemson's great now, but they're not winning by 41. I don't think. That's why I'm picking them to win. I got Charlotte covering at 41.5, and I'm taking under on the 62. Next up, we have the University of Texas San Antonio Road Raiders 1-2 versus the North Texas Mean Green 1-2, battle of the Conference USA teams. North Texas favored by 19. The Roadrunners cover that, under and over on the 58. Next up, a Big 12 matchup. We have the Oklahoma State Cowboys 3-0 versus the 12th ranked Texas Longhorns, who are 2-1. Oklahoma's won 7 of 10 versus Texas. Texas is favored by 5.5. I'm giving the 5.5 to Oklahoma State. I got Oklahoma State winning, Texas covering the 5.5, and over on the 73. All right, next up we have the 7th ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who are 2-0 versus the 3-0 out of the SEC, the 3rd ranked in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs. If Georgia can knock off Notre Dame, they have a 3-0 Florida coming up, a 3-0 Auburn coming up, a 2-1 Missouri, and a 2-1 Kentucky. I think if Notre Dame wants to make the playoffs like they did last year, they have to win out. They need help. They would need to beat Georgia here. They would need Georgia to go into the SEC championship game with 1 loss and to win. Because I think if you have or I'm sorry, if Notre Dame loses here, they would need Georgia to win it all in the SEC, or at least go to the SEC title game. That way, if Notre Dame's only loss was to Georgia, and Georgia is the SEC title game, that makes that loss a good loss, if that's such a thing. Now, if Georgia loses here, and Notre Dame goes on to make the playoffs undefeated, and Georgia's only loss is to Notre Dame, and they lost the SEC title game to Alabama, where they're a two-loss team, but to Notre Dame, who's undefeated, and to Alabama, who's undefeated or with one loss, then they have an argument to make the playoffs. So there's a lot of scenarios that can come back to this game right here. Georgia's favored by 14. Ooh, I'm picking the Bulldogs. I got them winning. I got them covering, taking over on the 56. Next up, we have the Sacramento State Hornets, 2-1, versus the Fresno State Bulldogs, 0-2. Bulldogs are favored by 24.5. I got them winning, covering, under on the 54.5. Next up, we have out of the Pac-12, the Colorado Buffaloes, 2-1. 24th ranked Arizona State Sun Devils, who are 3-0. Arizona State has won 8 of 10 versus Colorado. I have them winning, covering the 7.5, and over on the 15.5. Arizona, can they win the Pac-12? They got a 3-0 Utah, 2-1 USC, a 3-0 Washington State, and a 3-0 California to face to get there. What will it take for a Pac-12 team to make the playoffs? It's only happened once. Can it happen again? Can it be Arizona State? I think you have to have an undefeated Pac-12 team to make the playoffs. That's my opinion. I think the committee's looking at the SEC as if you have two SEC teams with one loss, and you have a Pac-12 champion with 2 losses, you have a Big Ten champion with 2 losses, you have a Big Ten team with 1 loss. They don't care about the championship. They care about the losses. We've seen before where a two-loss Big Ten team, Penn State, Big Ten champions, missed out, but Ohio State with 1 loss went. So if Arizona State, I got them winning here, covering and over. Hopefully they keep winning. Hopefully they get that committee something to really look at. Next up, we have Toledo Rockets, who are 1-1, versus Colorado State Rams, who are 1-2. Toledo's favored by 9.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 67. Next up, out of the Mountain West, we have the Utah State Aggies, 1-1. 3-0 San Diego State Aztecs. Utah State is favored by 4.5 on the road. Don't know why. I'm giving the home team those Aztecs to the 4.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 52.5. Next up, we have the Pac-12, the UCLA Bruins, 0-3, the 19th ranked Washington State Cougars, who are also 3-0. Washington State is favored by 18.5 at home. I have them winning. I have UCLA covering the 18.5 and over on the 56. And last but not least, we have the Central Arkansas Bears, 3-0, versus the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, 2-1. Hawaii is favored by 15.5 at home. I got them winning. I got the Central Arkansas Bears covering and under on the 67.5. All right, that is going to wrap up week number 4 NCAA college football. As always, thanks for watching the Robert Sports Show, and don't just have a great day. Have a spiffy day. Robert Sports Show, your YouTube leader, sports channel content.